One of the biggest questions around the T206 set has always been why. And it's not why were these cards produced, we know that answer. What we don't know, and the answer to the question that we still struggle to answer today, is why were certain players only included with certain backs. So today, we are going to dive into the 150 series, otherwise known as the very first printing of the T206 set. But welcome back to my channel. My name is Chris, otherwise known on Instagram and X as @CRT_sportscards. Now, first and foremost, which backs are considered 150 subject backs for the T206? There are 6 of them here. So number 1, you have Piedmont 150. Second, you have Sweet Cap 150 Factory 25. Sweet Cap 150 Factory 30, Sweet Cap 150 Factory 649, which is an overprint. You also have Sovereign 150, and then you have Hindu Brown. Those 6 brands make up the 150 series for the set. Now, we will also talk in a future video around which players are considered 150 subjects, because there are only 11. There are not 150. And this is where it can get confusing with T206, because these cards are not numbered. And look, you're not alone if you thought for the longest time that 150 equaled 150. I thought the same thing for the longest time with this set. But with these 6 different backs, the population, the amount of cards in each of them varies from 34, yes, 34, all the way to 156. Some will say 155. We'll get into those here in a quick second. But yes, the population of the players in the 150 series does vary dependent on the back of the card. So now, of these 6 different backs, which one is the easiest? Because one of them has to have only 150 cards in it. And you are correct. The Sovereign 150 back run set. Time out real quick. What I meant there from an easiest perspective is to remember which ones have just 150 cards. The Sovereign 150 back run set is very hard to put together, and most people say this is the second hardest run to put together of all 6 of these backs. Is only 150 cards. Some will also say, I'm a believer in this myself, that these were, and these are, the original 150 subjects that were intended in the very first printing of the set in 1909. So if you want to have a very nice, even 150 card set, go put together the Sovereign 150 set. It does, though, get a little bit more confusing from this point, mainly because this is where you start seeing the introduction of some of the biggest cards in the set, along with some other cards, they're Hall of Famers, that get a little bit murky. So number 1 here, from an additional card perspective, now that we're past Sovereign 150, we introduce Sherry McGee and the McGee era. We have Honus Wagner, Eddie Plank, Carl Lundgren, Huey Jennings portrait variation, and then Sam Crawford throwing. But how do these 6 cards interact with the other 5 different backs? Now, quick side note on Wagner and Plank. I don't for a second believe the stories around Wagner didn't like tobacco and Eddie Plank's plate broke. These cards, both of them, were printed over 2 different runs. We're going to talk about them being in both Piedmont and Sweet Cap. So I just don't believe these stories. I'm a firm believer, and I take no credit for this revelation, but Keith Olbermann's theory on the Monster podcast, which I heard 5 or 6 years ago, was these were chase cards. And I firmly believe that these were, in fact, chase cards in the set. The marketing team at the American Tobacco Company were skilled marketers. These were done, of course, to sell cigarettes. So I will go to my grave believing Wagner and Plank are chase cards, because both of those guys were tremendous players back in their day, and they absolutely would have sold more cigarettes if those cards were trickling out versus being a super print 6 that we talked about a few weeks ago. So that's my theory on Wagner and Planck. Now, getting back to the actual back discussions. So while Sovereign 150 did have all 150 minus the 6 cards I just spoke about, the next back run of these 6 is what people consider the hardest back run set to put together. And this is the Hindu Brown. This one, though, only includes 102 of the 156 cards that make up the 150 subjects. The only caveat here is there are 34 Southern Leaguers with an old mill or with a Hindu Brown back. So we're going to not talk about those right now. But looking specifically at 150 subjects, there are 102. So your first question is, why only 102? No one knows. I wish I could tell you right now why 48 subjects were not included. There is, though, a good theory as to why it was an even number. So in those Hindu packages, the cards came in pairs of 2. So it looks intentional to have only included an even number of players in the set. But you are also correct in saying 150 divided by 2 is 75 different pairings. So look, it's anyone's guess as to why Hindu Brown only has 102 of the 150. But now, let's say that you want to collect all 156. You have the resources to not only buy a Wagner, but also a Planck. You are going to find those 156 cards in the Piedmont 150 back. Now, the big question here is, if Sovereign 150 was in fact the original 150, why did they throw in there, why did they go in there and add in Wagner and Planck? Why did they throw in Jennings, Lundgren, and Crawford? Now, of course, the McGee error card is an error card. So there is, of course, the corrected one, the Magee versus the misspelling one. So that's kind of a difference of opinion on, is the set 156 or 155? It is, though, 156 different cards. So if you wanted to buy all of them, go hunt them down in a 150 Piedmont back. But now maybe you don't like Piedmont, you prefer Sweet Cap. So in Sweet Cap, Factory 25, of course the 150 group, Factory 25 and Factory 30, these are 153 cards, so 3 less. But if you do not have the resources for a Wagner or a Planck, it's actually 151 cards. So in Sweet Cap 25 and 30, you do have the addition of Sam Crawford. You lose, of course, the McGee error. You lose Lundgren, and you lose Huey Jennings. But from an overall big picture perspective, with Wagner, with Planck, you're looking at 153 cards in both Factory 25 and Factory 30. Now, what in the world is a factory overprint? Because this Sweet Cap 150 Factory 649 overprint is the last one that we have to talk about. And this variation is only 34 of the 156 subjects in the 150 series. Think of it like a transfer of a product. These cards were originally printed with Factory 30 at the bottom, but then you'll see that big red bar across the bottom and then the 649 right above it. So that is what a T206 overprint is. They've just blacked out, or in this case redded out, the old factory and moved it to a new factory. Factory 30, Factory 649 were both in New York. So why the transfer of product to that distributor versus this other one? Who really knows? And that's the beauty of T206. We don't know a lot of the answers. We know some things, but we don't know all. But if you wanted to have a very small condensed run of the first cards in the set, go put together a Sweet Cap 150 Factory Overprint 649, because that would give your set a really unique spin for the back of the card. And so just in case you weren't taking notes, here are your cliff notes. For the 150 subject first printing of T206, 150 equals 150 in Sovereign 150. In Hindu Brown, 150 equals 102. In Piedmont 150, that equals 156. In Sweet Cap factory 25 and factory 30 for Sweet Cap 150, that equals 153. And Sweet Cap factory overprint 649, 150 equals 34.